Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for virtual workshops, webinars, and conversations. If you were with us last week for the Lunch and Learn series, welcome back. We're excited to begin this series with today's session, Leading Effective Teams, Purpose, People, Process, and Pride, with Dr. Zachary Herrmann, Executive Director and Associated Faculty with Penn's Graduate School of Education. This series is brought to you by the Center for Professional Learning. The Center for Professional Learning designs and delivers professional learning opportunities that support educators, leaders, policymakers, entrepreneurs, and other professionals to deepen their knowledge, build their networks, and grow their careers. The Center for Professional Learning is excited to share some upcoming opportunities, including this current series, virtual conversations, webinars, and workshops, which will continue throughout the spring semester. We're also excited to share with you that coming up this summer, 2020, a series of virtual institutes, and then beginning in the academic year, coming up, some on-campus institutes. We invite you to learn more about the Center for Professional Learning at www.gsc.upenn.edu/professional learning. Thank you again for joining us for today's series. Let me invite Dr. Herrmann to get us started. Welcome, Dr. Herrmann. We're excited to have you with us. How is this Monday treating you, and what do we have to look forward to today?
Thank you, Chanel. The Monday is off to a good start. It's a bit windy and rainy here in Philadelphia, but like most of us, I'm inside. I'm excited for today to talk about team effectiveness. I think it's a particularly important time given the situation that many of us now find themselves in. So thank you all for joining us. We're quite impressed with the response this workshop series has had, not just for our community here in Philadelphia, but really globally. So thank you for joining us. The reason why I want to talk about teams is a few fundamental beliefs that I have and are shared by many. The first is teams, I believe, are one of the most powerful tools we have to take on complex problems. The idea of working together, drawing on the insights, the expertise, the experiences of multiple individuals to create a coherent, complex, complete picture of a problem is really only possible when people come together to work together. That's necessary when we take on complex work. It's also true that teams dramatically vary in their effectiveness. Some teams are able to take on very complex problems because they have found a way to work together in ways that allow them to problem solve, to generate ideas, to implement solutions, whereas other teams struggle even to approach and address routine types of problems. Therefore, looking at your team's effectiveness and constantly working to improve it is critical. It's always critical, but it's more critical now than ever because of the challenges facing our schools, our communities, our institutions. So today, I'm going to be talking about a few specific things that you can do with your team to help improve the likelihood that you will improve your team effectiveness. So what I'm hoping that you all do with us for the next 25 minutes is to call to mind a very specific team that you're currently a part of. So think of it about a team at work, a team within an organization that you're a part of, even your family could be considered a team, but think about a specific team. Because throughout the course of this webinar, we're going to go through some specific recommendations, ask a few specific questions, and I hope that you have that team in mind and you can think about what you want to do this afternoon, tomorrow, next week to help ensure that your team is as effective as possible. So call that team to mind, and I want you to think about how would you currently characterize the effectiveness of the team? Is the team operating at its potential? Is it doing the things that should be possible given the ideas, the expertise, the insights, the perspectives of the team members? Or, like for many of us, is the team falling short? What do you attribute that gap to? What has your team tried? And what can you do to improve the team effectiveness? Those are precisely the questions that we're going to address. To do that, I'm going to suggest asking 4 fundamental questions for your team. For each of those questions, I've got one specific recommendation. This recommendation might be right for you. A different recommendation might be right for you, but the point is, ask this question of the team that you're a part of, ask it within the team, and try to figure out how you can reach a common understanding. So I'm going to share my screen here to start with these 4 fundamental questions. So the first fundamental question relates to purpose. This is so fundamental, in fact, that it might be awkward to ask. But if it's awkward to ask, that might mean that you haven't actually had an explicit conversation around this question in quite some time. Fundamentally, what is this team trying to do? What's our team's purpose? The second question is regarding people. Who's on our team, and what are our roles and responsibilities? Do we have a shared sense of how we interact with each other, who's on the team, and how we're dividing the work of our team? The third is regarding process. How does our team work together? Do we have clear systems and processes and structures to communicate, to make decisions, to update each other, to solve problems? And the third relates to pride. What is this team doing to intentionally build pride in our work? How are we making decisions in ways that we can look back at our body of work and be excited and proud about what we have been able to accomplish? So let's dig into the first question, purpose. What is this team's purpose? Now here comes the recommendations. This is a new term that I hope you adopt. It's an exciting term for me. It sounds kind of technical, but it's a very fundamental task of any sort of facilitator or leader, and that is to test goal consensus. So what does that mean? It means test the extent to which members of your team are in consensus around what you are trying to achieve. Do all members of your team share the same understanding about what you're attempting to do? And that can be done simply by asking a question in your next team meeting. Can we review what our objective is right now? What are we trying to do? Oftentimes in team meetings, we get caught up in the how or the what. We quickly distribute tasks or delegate different responsibilities, but without having the fundamental question of what are we trying to do, and are we all on the same page? Without testing that consensus, we can easily get sidetracked and end up doing work that might be contrary to the goals or even in conflict at the worst. So that's recommendation number 1. At your next team meeting, in your next conversation with a member of your team, try to determine, actually test the goal consensus, try to determine, are we all on the same page with what our team is trying to do? The second is people. The recommendation here is simply to ask, whose voice is missing? Many of our teams in this moment in history are taking on complex problems. The more complex the problem is, the more important it is that your team has developed a complete, coherent picture of that problem. To do that, your team will benefit from a diverse set of perspectives, insights, and your team might not currently have the membership in the team to make sure you have access to those insights. So for example, I know many schools are now considering how to transition their in-person classes to remote teaching. The perspectives of students themselves, the perspectives of families that are now taking on many of the responsibilities that the school once did, are critical voices for the team to understand a complete picture of the problem. So whose voice is missing? Who could help us better understand the problem is a question that your team can ask. And you don't have to wait. You can ask it at your next team meeting. If we had this voice at the table, we could create a better sense of, we could create a deeper understanding of the problem. Ask that question and discuss with your team. The third is process. And the recommendation here might sound a little bit odd, and I'll explain a little bit why. The recommendation is collaborate, but only if it's necessary. I'm going to stop my screen share just for a moment here. I say collaborate, but only if necessary. Collaboration takes a particular set of processes. For collaboration, you investigate the problem, you explore it, you don't jump to solutions. For collaboration, you don't quickly move to consensus, you don't quickly try to make decisions, you actually encourage diverse perspectives, encourage us to create a more complete picture of the problem. Collaboration takes a lot more time, it takes a much bigger investment in effort and energy, and it's not the right fit for every single problem that you're going to do. One of the fundamental questions a team has to answer is on which problems, on which challenges are we going to collaborate, and where does it make sense to delegate authority to different team members? Teams often get this question wrong. We end up spending a lot of time, a lot of energy focused on problems that we should have just told Susan to do, and instead, we actually delegate tasks that we really need a coherent, complete picture that can only happen when the team comes together to problem solve. So as a team, you need to be thinking about, are we collaborating on the right work? Are we investing our team meeting time, our problem solving time on the challenges that are most worthy of collaboration? And are we delegating things where we can? So that's an important thing for your team to consider. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. This quote explains some of the process differences in collaboration. Rather than immediately brainstorming solutions, a collaborative team must first investigate the problem. Rather than working to build quick consensus, a collaborative team should encourage divergent perspectives. Rather than assume they have the expertise to develop a solution, the team should seek widely for input and insight. Recognizing that you will not have the time, the energy, the human power to collaborate on everything. It's your leadership decision to determine where should we collaborate, where should we engage in these collaborative processes, and where should we just delegate authority for someone to make the decision. The final P is for pride. Even with teams that have fully understood and reached consensus on what goal they're trying to achieve, that they've got clear delineations of responsibilities and roles among the team members, when they've established clear processes to enact their work, they can still struggle if the team members feel isolated, if the team members feel a lack of a sense of belonging, or the team members don't feel committed to the work they're doing. So for pride, it's what are we going to do to make sure that our team feels invested, feels excited, feels energized by the work we're trying to do. This specific recommendation comes actually from one of my team members, and you heard from her at the opening of this webinar, which is to create a win board. Actively search for wins from your team, things that are going well, progress that you have made, bring them to the surface of the team's consciousness, call them out. And in terms of our team, we literally have an electronic board where we can post these wins and celebrate them. Without recognizing and celebrating and honoring these wins, it can be easy, particularly for virtual teams, to feel disconnected to the impact that their work has, and even lose perspective on the very good progress that they might be making. So in summary, we had 4 different categories for team effectiveness with a specific recommendation for each category. For purpose, I recommend at your next team meeting or in your next conversation with a team member, test goal consensus. Are you on the same page with your team members about what your team is trying to do? For people, ask the question, whose voice is missing? Assuming that you're taking on some complex problem, whose voice would you benefit from having at the table that would give you a more complete picture of the problem you're trying to solve? Process. Collaborate, but only if it's necessary. Think about, where do we want to invest our time as a team? Where do we want to delegate different responsibilities to team members? What are the sticky, thorny, complex issues that we really want to invest collaborative processes around versus what are more the technical problems that we can just outsource to expertise. And then finally, pride, create a win board. Find some way as a team to identify, surface, and celebrate the wins and progress that your team is making. So those are my 4 recommendations. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I hope that you find specific ways for you to implement those recommendations in whatever team you have. We do have a few minutes left, so I'm going to ask Chanel if there are any questions that are coming in from participants.
There are. We've got some great questions. This first one comes from Claire Westcott. And the question is, what are some of the most important pieces to keep in mind for school teams that are now working remotely?
One of the things that I've seen from several school teams is this first question about purpose. Even on a single team, different team members might have very different understandings about what that team is now trying to do. For example, one team member might think our job is to transition from in-person learning to remote learning as smooth as possible without missing a heartbeat. So we want to move quickly to equipping our teachers with online resources and make sure that we get to business as usual as quickly as possible. Another team member might see this as an opportunity to really rethink what the curriculum of the school looks like, and maybe see this as an opportunity to equip students with more authentic learning experiences where they're taking on projects at home and using their community and using the current pandemic as a source for learning. Both of those represent 2 different goals. If the team itself isn't clear on what they're trying to achieve, it's going to be difficult for them to really align their resources, their time, their investment in any coherent direction. Now, it's possible that both of those purposes can be achieved at the same time, but it's probably more likely that until your team really gets clear, what are we trying to do in this moment, then you're not going to be able to allocate the resources, the time in a way that's going to be as effective as possible.
Great, thank you so much. We have another question. What if collaboration is necessary, but the collaborating team is the problem?
Yeah.
Or is showing difficulty in aligning?
Yeah. So this is the question of team effectiveness. Unfortunately, the problems that we face aren't always proportional to our capacity as a team to face them. As in, sometimes our teams are thrown challenges that we are fully ill-equipped to take on. And that is a mismatch between the complexity and the challenge of the problem and the capacity of the team. And I've often seen too that when a team tries to collaborate around a problem and they don't have the collaborative skills, they don't have the ability to really explore a problem, to seek divergent perspectives, to generate several possible solutions, to employ a clear decision-making process. When a team doesn't have those collaborative skills and they try to collaborate, the result can be worse than if they had just delegated someone to figure it out. In other words, bad collaboration can create a negative team culture, can erode trust, can lead to less thoughtful solutions than really, really good just delegation of work. And so I think there's a kind of a dual strategy that needs to take place. One, be really mindful about what is the capacity of this team, and given that capacity, what are the problems that we're going to take on together, and where are we going to outsource the problems to individual team members? So be mindful about what the team takes on. But 2, how do we develop our collaborative capacity? Collaboration is a skill. Like all skills, it can improve with practice. Your team won't get better at collaboration until it practices and reflects on collaborating. So that's why picking some projects that might be the right bite size, might be the right complexity to gain some momentum and success can help build the collaborative capacity of the team.
Great, thank you so much. We're getting some questions about how to craft a win board, especially in a virtual space, and what types of things might go on a win board.
It's a great question. I'm actually going to pass this question to you, Chanel. who is a member of the team that I'm on, the Center for Professional Learning, and conceived of this idea and has facilitated this process. Can you answer that, Chanel?
Sure, I will share the information I have and welcome additional ideas as well. Anything that is worthy of encouragement is great for a win board. And so it could be something that is specific to goals that your team has set forward or norms that your team has identified. Like we're really excited about making each other look good. And so a way to celebrate that might be simply to say, in this moment, in a webinar, when your teammate invites you to share information about something you're working on your team, that's something that that makes another team member look good. And so we want to celebrate that as a team. It could also be something really simple, like I really am thankful that a member of my team called me to check on me today. And that felt like it helped me to move through the day. And so I want to celebrate that. And those could go on any space that you are sharing. Now that we're in a virtual space, it could be a Google Doc, it could be a social media wall. We happen to be using a free use space called pinup.com. So that might be something that's worth checking out. But really, it's just any space that is visible to multiple members of your team.
Thank you, Chanel. And I want to call out just something that you said, that a win board is meant to identify behaviors, actions, achievements that you want to reinforce. So you have to have a clear sense, like, how does this team want to work together? And when we identify that happening, elevating that. In so many teams, there are vicious cycles where we end up reinforcing bad behavior. And when that behavior gets reinforced, we're in a downward spiral with our culture, with our effectiveness, with our performance. The win board is one way to create a virtuous cycle where we identify moments where we're leaning into our norms, we're leaning into our commitments, we're leaning into the promises that we've made for each other about how we want to work, identifying them, celebrating. So we're creating a virtuous cycle, and we gradually improve the effectiveness, the performance, the trust, the culture of our team. We probably have time for maybe one or two more questions, Chanel, if there are any.
I'm going to just pick up on something that you just mentioned. If a team is stuck in a cycle, what might be some ways to make use of the 4 strategies or steps that you shared that can help them to get unstuck and move forward?
Yeah, I think this is such a critical question and a complex one. I think that the things that teams do to improve themselves are exactly the things that are really difficult to do if the team is in a bad place. Even asking the question, wait, what are our roles and responsibilities of this team, is a question that is a risky question. It exposes the fact that we might not all be on the same page. It might be a question that might be experienced as threatening to a team leader who sees it as their responsibility for making clear divisions of roles and responsibilities to make sure the purpose is clear. So when you ask questions like, wait, what's our team's purpose? Wait, what are our roles and responsibilities? Those are all threatening. And so the dilemma is that some of those questions that you need to be able to ask to improve the effectiveness of the team are inherently difficult to do if the team is already in a bad place. I think finding ways to one way that I've recommended in a previous webinar is to ask the team to reflect on previous teams that they've been in, to provide a little bit of space between the conversation around team effectiveness and your current team. Think about a team that you've been in that's worked really well or that has really struggled. What were true about those teams, and what can we learn from those teams? What are the things those teams did that we might want to adopt and use for ourselves? What are some of those things those teams did that we want to avoid? The second thing is, I think the power of the agenda is not to be underestimated. If you can help shape the agenda for a team meeting, and you can open with an exercise that helps express appreciations, which is kind of the pride component, or where you can make sure that all action items are associated with a particular individual, which relates to people. Or if you could even open the webinar, or the meeting will likely take place in the webinar, I'm recognizing. If you can open the meeting where you can give everyone a chance to voice their understanding about the purpose and what they're trying to do. Those moments create the opportunity for the team to understand where people are at, and hopefully surface some misunderstandings.